Joining us now is Conservative MP Justine Greening, who voted against May's deal and is pushing for a referendum.
Oh, a referendum we've already had, Justine Greening.
No, just a referendum on the options we've got facing us now, which is we can have the PM's deal. I didn't think it was very good, but people might prefer it. We can have a departure with no deal. That's an option for Britain, or we can keep the current deal we've got.
Except
and I don't think Parliament will choose any of those, as we've seen. So my point is that if that's the case, we might not like it, but that's the reality we have to ask people.
It's a failure of Parliament, though, isn't it, and of the government?
I think it's a failure of party politics.
There was a referendum in which the majority of those who voted said, we want Brexit, and they read a leaflet which said, the government will implement what you decide, not the government will make a hash of the negotiations and then come back to you and ask you to decide something different.
I recognise that, and I think there were two challenges that we had to get over. One was the fact that, as you were just saying in an earlier piece, people who voted Leave had very different reasons for it, and actually what we've had to try and do is clarify what they were and what kind of Brexit they wanted. And in the end, there's a soft Brexit, which sees us having a closer relationship, and actually that's what the PM's gone for. It turns out, and I think most MPs have found this with their local communities, that people who voted Leave are telling us they wanted a much cleaner break. That's not been what's offered. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that Parliament works on party political lines. That's its sort of wiring. And, of course, what's happened is Brexit is something that cuts across all of that, which is why you've seen the parties arguing in amongst themselves. And I think that's why what you need to now do is, by all means, have the party political discussions. I happen to think that the personalities are just going to get in the way of all of this. I think you need to allow
whether Jeremy Corbyn comes to the table.
Yeah, I just think that it's the personalities are the problem. The parties are the problem. Brexit isn't about party politics. It's why a general election won't fix this.
Do you think Theresa May...
So you need to just ask MPs to say if there's a consensus. And if there isn't, then I'm afraid we do need to go back to people to find out.
But do you think, when you say that personalities are a problem, do you think Theresa May's personality is a problem? I mean, this isn't just political, is it? Because this requires enormous diplomatic charisma, actually, to persuade people, even within your own party. We know that 118 of them voted against her, to back a very difficult deal, trying to please everybody.
I think she's been very dogged in pursuing her deal, but she's said she wants to listen to what MPs have to say, and I think she absolutely does now need to do that. People have been telling the Prime Minister...
Why hasn't she done that till now?
Well, people have, you know... I came back on this... I was on this show in July saying that this is exactly where we were going to get. It was obvious that the Prime Minister's deal was not going to get passed by the House of Commons. It was a waste of a month delaying it from Christmas. But the point is, we are where we are. In terms of how we get through to some kind of resolution to this, you need to have the votes in Parliament, like we've had on her deal, on the other key options. One is no deal. I think the other one, clearly, that people are talking about is Norway. That's almost the softest of Brexits. It's where we mirror all the rules, but we're no longer around the table. If we haven't got a consensus in Parliament, we have to accept that. And I think then, because of this question about what Brexit people actually voted for, you then have to go back and actually clarify that. And frankly, just give them the chance to have their say in all of this. I think a lot of my community feels very excluded by the entire process.
But even people that you're spoken to in your community that have already voted to leave, are they saying they'd value another chance to vote again on a clearer... Or are they just saying, or are they just saying,
there's a massive
Justine, we've
frustration.
left, we've voted to leave, I don't want to do another referendum, we've won?
There's a massive frustration that they cast a vote and then what's been proposed just simply doesn't deliver it. Of course, for the 48% who didn't want Brexit, they look at the fact that the people who voted for Brexit aren't happy and just think, well, what's the point? And I think for them also, and for all of everybody who has been in touch, they can't understand why you'd follow all the rules without now being able to set them and be part of making sure that they actually work for Britain. So in a sense, we've reached a logjam, we've got to unblock it, and I think it's going to end up, I'm sorry to say, because I know people don't like elections, I think it is going to end up being the British public. However, if that gets a solution on Brexit, then it's better off, because I know Parliament could just spend years debating this.
Sorry, I know we have John Mann, Labour Brexiteer, standing by. I don't understand why you would hold a second referendum if the likely result of a second referendum was that Leave would win, and we still don't know what the plan is.
We do have two plans on Brexit. One is the Prime Minister's version, her deal, which is a soft Brexit. The other is that we simply leave on the 29th of March. It would probably have to be later if you go back to people, with no deal, and then subsequently negotiate a trading arrangement with the EU. Those are two clear-cut options. People need to tell us which of those they want, including people who voted Remain.
Those aren't the only two options.
And they're not the only two options, which is...
So why would you hold a
because
referendum on
all
them?
the rest of them are refinements on those variants. So you could go round in circles for years, and we haven't got time.
Feels like for 2.5 years we have been going round.
Let's head to Westminster. Labour Brexiteer John Mann is there for us this morning. Good morning to you, Mr Mann. Thank you for joining us. We're just hearing sort of how complicated this situation is from Justine Greeding in the studio. How on earth do we move this forward? We know Theresa May was trying to get all the leaders around the table last night to try and hammer out some sort of consensus. And yet Jeremy Corbyn just decided he wasn't going to go until no deal is taken off the table. An important negotiating factor and a tool that she surely will be using with the EU. How on earth do we go forward?
Through compromise.
So Jeremy Corbyn compromises on that, comes to the table and then coordinates with the other leaders to try and find a solution?
Hopefully Jeremy Corbyn will, but there has to be compromise all round. You know, in reality, it's kind of a third in Parliament. Not quite, but approximately on the different views. So what is needed, Theresa May's advantage is she's the middle option to the two more extreme options, is that her deal has to be improved. I mean, we could rule some of the options out. I know Justine wanted to get some of the things off the table by voting them down. I have a better suggestion. Perhaps her and I could agree. The first thing we should do is have a vote in Parliament, a binding vote on whether to have a second referendum. If she wins that vote, that's what will happen. If she doesn't, that would be off the table. So we could do that, say on Monday, have a vote in Parliament on the second referendum. In fact, she could put that to Parliament with others. I'd be happy to back having that vote straight away. And if she wins that vote, that'll be what happens. That's the majority decision. Whether it's popular, I think it'd be unpopular in the country. But that's what Parliament decide.
What would you vote? John Mann, what would you vote if that was put to Parliament? Would you want a second referendum?
No. We've had a referendum. And the reason I wouldn't is because I think it undermines democracy. We haven't implemented the first decision. I think if people really wanted a second referendum, it ought to be in 5 years' time, when people have had the chance to see in the real world, has leaving the European Union been a good thing or a bad thing?
Can I just ask, you voted with the government, didn't you, to back Theresa May's withdrawal agreement. You were one of 3 Labour MPs who did that. Then what did you vote in the no confidence vote?
I voted for no confidence.
How could you have confidence in the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement and then the next day decide you don't have confidence in her and the government?
One of the options that was available was a general election. A general election might have led to a majority government, a majority Labour government or a majority Tory government. That would have made life much easier in Parliament.
The thing is that Theresa May said we've got to put self-interest, party political interest aside. You're a clear example of when party political interest has trumped anything else. You think she's come up with the right compromise. You think she's come up with a good withdrawal agreement which ticked a box for you. And the next day you just tell her, actually, decided I'm going to vote with the party.
You make a good point. I plead guilty. Every MP pleads guilty. That's the system we have. But that option now has been voted down. And what I'm going to be doing, I'll see the Prime Minister today with other Labour MPs. I'm going to try and get her deal improved. It can be improved. I didn't vote for it because I thought this was a perfect deal. You see, even if that vote, some people called it the meaningful vote. I call it the meaningless vote, because actually there's a bill that can be amended that I would have attempted to amend after the vote, the so-called big vote, and we'd be voting different ways on that. What I want to have is some improvements to the deal, including guaranteeing workers' rights and environmental standards in the country. So we compete on high standards, not on low standards in the future. And that's a pretty big issue to resolve.
OK, John Mann, thanks very much indeed.
Interestingly, as I think John was sort of saying he's pleading guilty, Justine, is essentially proving your point, which is the parties are getting in the way of any of this going forward because, as Susanna pointed out, he voted with the deal but then voted against the government because he followed party lines. But what he said then about taking that option of a second referendum to Parliament on Monday, is that something you would table, something you would look
You'd have to get it through Parliament.
I think, well, you're right, and I think we should be allowed to vote on all of the key options, which are leaving with no deal. We need to find out whether Parliament supports that. It absolutely is a route we could go down. People are talking about this Norway option, basically where we mirror the rules. We should have a vote on that. And yes, absolutely. Finally, if one of those two routes works, those are the votes you actually really need to have, because actually if one of those routes gets a consensus, you don't need a second referendum. The second referendum has always been, in a sense, a last resort if you can't go anywhere else. OK, Justine Greening, John Mann, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you for joining us this morning.
If you're tearing your hair out, I sympathise.